As a family, we haven't had an awful lot of success when on holidays or just on a weekend and over the years of going for a walk. There have been times when we've set out late, like this photo, on holiday, thinking the walk would maybe be okay. There's two fairly young children, maybe about 2 miles, only to get lost. And it's still legendary in the Dulson household to remember the 8-mile walk that we ended up going on through fields of cows and Reuben touching a snake and all of those kind of things. Are natural when you go on a walk as a family, aren't they? It's time still early on in my recovery from surgery a number of years ago, but feeling able enough to go for a short walk. That's what you need to hold in your mind, a short walk. And after a little while, my wife, always wise, says, I think we should turn back now. I said, no, I'm okay. I feel fine. We can keep going. Can't be that much further, only to carry on. And then that point of no return, see a sign that says there are steps that total more than 400 up this mountain. I got to the top. I thought I'd got as far as heaven, but I'd got to the top, and I thought I'm going to have to be medically helicoptered out of this place. I was feeling so bad. And then we went on a walk, and it was a lovely sunny day. So we were just sort of shorts and hoodies and those kind of things, not thinking we're going to need anything else. And again, there's a pattern here. We got lost. And the weather turned, and this is the same walk. Let me just do that. These are the same walk. Can you see the difference? Yes, I know what you're thinking. Why did I not give my coat up? Who do I choose? I was a Boy Scout. I went prepared. The coat was in my rucksack. If the other three didn't, they're not going to learn the lesson if I just give them my coat, are they? So if ever the Dulsons invite you, say, let's just go for a little walk for your own safety and health, just don't do it. Just say no. But walking is one of those exercises that we're told is good for us. You know, walk 7,000, 10,000, 15, 20,000 steps a day. It is good for you. And at this time of year, people make determined New Year resolutions that they're going to walk more in an effort to get a little bit healthier. And this morning, we're starting a new series looking at the walks of Jesus. If you want to know a joke about walks, see James Boucher later. He's got an amazing joke about Jesus and walking. Humor him and laugh when he tells it to you. But you see, Jesus walked everywhere. There were no cars in those days, as we know, so he walked everywhere. And just as regular walking will get you physically healthy and be good for you, so too looking at the walks of Jesus will help us get spiritually healthy as we learn life-transforming truths from what Jesus did on his walks. And just like Jesus, when you walk as opposed to drive places, you see life from a different viewpoint. It's slower. You have to take time to notice what's around you and what's important. And I suspect you're very similar to me, and you can often feel that we live in a society where we rush through life. And I won't walk, I'll take the car because it's quicker. And yet, for this season, and it will take us up to and past Easter, I invite you to step out of the car, metaphorically speaking, that is, you're allowed to use your car, okay? But step out of the car and the speed of life and come with me as we take a walk with Jesus and learn from him. For all of his walks have great purpose, and there are things that we can learn. And as we walk with Jesus, we will see a different perspective, which, if we allow it, will grow us in our walk of faith with him. And for this first sermon, we're going to go right back to the start of Jesus' ministry as we see him walking along the beach, calling his first disciples as we think about the walk of calling. It's a good one to start this series with. It's a good one to start a new year with. For not only do people decide to alter their lives to get healthy, get fit, lose weight, but also people at this time of year ponder, what are they doing with their lives? Before mobile phones, and you need to be a certain age for some of these illustrations, do you remember your mum standing on the doorstep and calling your name? Because tea was ready, or you were late. And you'd still be out playing with your mates. Where I lived, there was the street and a mountain. Street, mountain, street, mountain. So we would be up the mountain, and we would all at different times hear the voice of our mothers calling us. Wait! And you knew either you were in trouble, tea was ready, or it was time to come in. One of the three. And you'd rush home. You never got a text to say it's time for tea. You'd get this bellowing call. Parents never seemed to put their shoes on and walk to find their children. Did it happen to you? Yes. Or was it just in Wales? It was just bellow out. If your father ever called your name, then you knew you were in trouble. But if mum called your name, you knew normally it was tea was ready. We're called in many different ways and for many different reasons. As kids, a friend would call on your door sometimes and saying, your mum would say, is Wayne coming out to play? You just send your mates a message now, and you don't always go out to play like we used to back in the good old days. I remember being at a friend's house on a Sunday after church and getting a call at about 1 o'clock. And I answered, the friend's mum gave me the phone, and the only words my mum said was, I'm waiting, and she put the phone down. Because on a Sunday, dinner was at 1 o'clock. It wasn't at 10 past 1, and it wasn't at 5 to 1, it was 1 o'clock. And so I wasn't there at 1 o'clock, and she didn't say, is everything okay? The call was just said, I'm waiting. And I knew in that moment, I needed to break the speed limit and get home very, very quickly. After an interview, you wait for the phone call or email to call you into a new job. We wait for calls from doctors and hospitals with news of test results. There are many different types of calls. I can still remember the call from Corinne about an hour or so after my initial Zoom meeting with her and a few elders and trustees with the possibility of me coming here, and her call was to say they like to call me for a formal interview. I felt excited and nauseous all at the same time. And God calls us to many things. And this year, he may call you to something new. He may call you into ordained ministry or to mission work. But for all of us, there is a call that God offers, and it's the big idea of this first message, because Jesus calls us from our ordinary life into extraordinary discipleship. Sometimes children break into another child's ordinary day simply by walking up to them in the playground and inviting them to play. And in this sermon, we're going to look at what it means when Jesus calls us from our ordinary lives into extraordinary discipleship. And I'm not talking simply about giving our lives to Jesus. We need to see the distinction, for you can be a Christian but not be engaged in discipleship. You see, this isn't about whether or not you love Jesus. Obviously, that is crucial to the life of a Christian, but it's about whether you're a follower, an apprentice, a disciple of Jesus. That is a completely different matter. For loving Jesus and following Jesus doesn't always go hand in hand. You can be married but not always live as a married person in your attitudes and your actions. And when it comes to discipleship, the question is, are we people who, as well as loving Jesus, intentionally choose to follow Jesus? And what would we learn from him and his teachings and his ways? Not simply a one-time event, but it's an ongoing, never-ending process of transformation. So we ask ourselves, do we see the walk of calling from an ordinary life to an extraordinary life of discipleship? And this isn't about being called into an event or ministry, as great as that is, and that does happen, but it's about being called into a life fully with Jesus. And we see this walk of calling in Matthew 4, 18 to 22. One day, as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, also called Peter, and Andrew, throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus called out to them, "Come, follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people." And they left their nets at once and followed him. A little further up the shore, he saw two other brothers, James and John, sitting in a boat with their father Zebedee, repairing their nets. And he called them to come too. They immediately followed him, leaving the boat and their father behind. This, friends, is the walk of calling that Jesus offered the four fishermen, and it's the walk of calling that he offers you and me. And while we might think that loving Jesus will naturally translate into following Jesus, it's not always the case. Notice in this passage, Jesus doesn't invite the fishermen into a loving relationship with himself. Loving Jesus is never mentioned, but following Jesus is. Now, yes, we know that we're called to love Jesus, and I'm laboring the point, but it's only so we see it doesn't always mean we follow Jesus. We can give our hearts to Jesus, but still live lives that don't look like we're following him. For the walk of calling will mean that transformation happens in our lives. And you see, friends, this is not simply a story about four fishermen. It's a story about us and how Jesus still calls us from the ordinary to the extraordinary. And today we're going to learn what that means for our lives, because if we're being called from ordinary life to discipleship, what are the things we need to realize and learn so that we can see them and implement them in our lives? And the first one is that Jesus meets us where we are. You see, Jesus met the fishermen at their place of work. Imagine you're standing on the shore of Galilee and you see this drama unfold before you. You see these fishermen working, casting the nets, mending their nets in their boats as the rhythm of the sea moves them back and forth. You can see that they're seasoned fishermen and have been doing this for a long time. And then you see Jesus, and he walks towards them. And as he walks towards them, he simply says, "Come follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people." And then you see Peter and Andrew just put down their nets, get out of the boat, and follow him. Notice, they didn't do an Alpha course. As great as that is, and if you want to sign up for Alpha, see Corin and Pete after the service. They didn't make any plans. They didn't even ask him any questions. There wasn't even a prayer of commitment that was spoken. They simply heard the call and chose to follow. And it was during their ordinary working day. Jesus met them where they were. And I love the way this passage starts in Matthew, for we read, one day. It's not one special and strangely awe-inspiring with a feeling that something wonderful and powerful is going to happen kind of a day. It's not one day as Peter and Andrew were on a Christian retreat day. It's not one day as they were worshiping with a kicking worship band. It's not one day as Peter and Andrew were thinking and praying about what to do with their lives. It was simply one ordinary, same as yesterday, day. It's a day like any other day. It's a bit like the day we read about in Acts chapter 10, where we read one day about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he had a vision. An angel of the Lord, as real as his next door neighbor, came in and said, "Cornelius." That wasn't a special day. It was an ordinary day. And one day at about 3 o'clock, God came and visited Roman called Cornelius and spoke to him. And that led him to send in men to meet a man called Peter. Yes, the same Peter that dropped his nets, who went and explained the truth about Jesus, and many were baptized, and they started their walk of discipleship from ordinary to extraordinary life with Jesus. And it all happened on one normal, ordinary day. That's how I trained for ministry. I was sitting in my home, 19 Broad Street, Griffithstown, Pontypool. That's where I was sat. It was a 2-up, 2-down terraced house that I was renting. I was sat at the dining room table, looking through a prospectus, because I was studying for a qualification in computer studies. And I thought, well, if I could, because I was of a certain age, I could go on and do a degree and get a good job. And as I was literally leafing through this prospectus for a university, in my spirit, God said, this day, throw the prospectus in the bin and apply to Cardiff Baptist College. I literally threw it in the bin and applied. It wasn't a special day. I wasn't on my knees praying. I didn't have worship going on in the background. I hadn't felt a call in a Sunday service. It was just one day. The dog was by the side of me. I had a mug of tea and I was flicking through a prospectus. Nothing extraordinary was going on. And yet on that one day, God says, now's the time. Now is when I call you. Here's the lesson to learn, friends. There's nothing wrong, and it is right and proper with taking time out with God, going on retreat, seeking him for his answers to your questions. There's nothing wrong with seeking God and his will for you, your life. There's nothing wrong with being in a worship time and sensing God calling you to something. He does all of that. But also know that God can call you from your place of ordinary. He spoke to these 4 fishermen during their ordinary daily place of work, and he can do this with us. See, Jesus meets us where we are. It can be our place of work, our commute, our time at home, at the gym. It can be anywhere. The walk of calling from Jesus to us is the walk from believing in him to following him, truly following him. You don't have to be perfect or prepared. You simply have to be willing to move when he calls. You see, Jesus steps into our ordinary to call us to his extraordinary. And if Jesus meets us where we are, the question is, when he calls, will we, like those disciples, will we drop our nets? Will we move from where we are when he calls? For you see, the call from Jesus to follow me requires leaving something behind. It's 2001. It's a Sunday afternoon, the day after I moved from South Wales to start my first job role in ordained ministry. The friends and my sister and brother-in-law had helped me move the previous day and had spent the night. They'd all gone home. It was mid-afternoon. And there was a rocking chair in the manse in Upminster. And I'm sat in the rocking chair. And all of a sudden, I started to cry. And when I say I started to cry, I'm talking, I sobbed my heart out. Maybe for 45 minutes. It wasn't because I didn't want to be in Upminster. I'm a Welshman. I didn't want to be in Essex. It had nothing to do with that. It didn't matter that I was an alien in a foreign land. And everybody spoke a little bit funny. I was excited about the role in Upminster. It had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with what I'd left behind. I'd left my community. I'm from a village. I'd left all I'd ever known. I'd left my culture. I'd left the place where I grew up. And even though my mum had died 2 years previously, I felt as if all over I was leaving my mother. So I was leaving her hometown. I'd left my home church. I left my friends. I left everything that I knew to drive 200 miles. And even though I'd heard the call to follow me, and I obediently obeyed that call, it still hurt. Because following Jesus meant leaving something behind. Because following Jesus fully requires leaving something behind. And that as we leave something behind, it is personal and it is disruptive. Peter and Andrew and James and John left things behind when they followed Jesus. They left a career that they knew. They left their family. James and John literally left their dad sitting in the boat. Can you imagine it? He just sees his two lads just get up and follow this man. And he's literally left holding the nets and the fish. They left their home, they left their community. The walk of calling for them was personal and it was disruptive. Yes, there was excitement at what they were walking into, but there would have been pain at what they were leaving behind. And Jesus tells us to pick up our cross and follow him, not pick up our woolly blanket, which suggests that in following Jesus, there is a cost. You know, as a family, there has always been a cost every time we have moved. Whether that be leaving family and close friends, the love that we've had for the churches that we've led, leaving the coast that we were living by in Portsmouth, leaving a role that I know which I know so it gives me security. There's always been a cost, and it is both personal and it can be disruptive. It is personal because there are things that I wish were different, but they weren't. And it's disruptive because there are challenges that we have faced each time we have moved. When we moved to Portsmouth, Reuben didn't have a school place. We didn't have anywhere to live. It was personal and it was disruptive. And for all of us, when we hear the call to follow Jesus in life, there will be a cost. This may mean we have to change our lifestyles. It may mean we need to let go of fear, our ambitions, our habits. For the fishermen, they had to leave their nets behind. What nets is Jesus calling you to let go of as you move to fully follow him? For some, we may need to let go of all hurts. I was in a meeting this week and someone said, I just can't let that go. I can't get over that. And that is a choice they are making. But until they let it go, they will never move forward fully with Jesus. We have to let go of our personal wants and desires and preferences. And it is personal and it is disruptive. As you step into 2026, if you are making an intentional decision to follow Jesus more fully, there will be things that you need to leave behind. But what you gain is far greater. Every church as a family, and I'm not saying this that aren't the Dulsons great, because I can assure you we're not. It's just to earth it in reality so you can kind of understand what I'm talking about. Every church we have moved from as a family, there has been pain as we have driven away from that place. There have been times when we have been crying as we drive away from a place that we've served for the last time. But in all instances, we have gained so much more. When I left Wales, I gained finding my wife. Wow. I gained way more than I deserved. And I gained, 1,000,000 times more what I'd lost. When we left Loughton, our kids in Portsmouth gained finding a saving faith in Jesus. There is nothing greater than that. When we left Portsmouth, we have gained a joy in ministry life at a level we've never experienced before. There is pain and there is disruption and it is personal, but there has always been gain, which is far greater than anything we have lost, friends. Yes, there are things as a family that we've had to leave behind, but we've gained so much more. These fishermen left everything that was deeply personal, it was deeply disruptive for them, and those they left behind. But look at what they gained. They spent 3 years with the Savior of the world. And over 2,000 years later, they are still teaching us things. Leaving behind things is hard, but in that process, we gain more of Jesus. For Jesus promises to shape our lives into something greater than we currently know. For you see, friends, Jesus forms disciples on the journey. Notice When Jesus called the fishermen to follow him, he said, I will show you how to fish for people. In other words, I know you don't know it at the moment. You don't know it at this present time. But if you follow me, I will grow you. I will show you how to fish for people. He didn't say, can you go and do a theological degree? Can you go and do an alpha course? Can you be in church for at least 3 years? Can you go and do all that stuff? And once you know it, then come and follow me? No. He said, follow me in the knowing nothing that you know now. And on the journey, I will grow you. On the journey, I will show you how to fish for people. He didn't ask them what experience they had of winning people for Jesus. And that's because Jesus forms us as his disciples on the journey. I remember when I used to work in a bank, in a branch bank. And my first job, I'm 18, my first job was upstairs in the offices, and you had to manually put through all the debits and credits that the bank took that day. And it had a balance at the end of the day. And I remember they used to call it the waste machine. And I remember doing this. And at the end of the day, then other people whose what they could do at the end of the day relied on what I was doing, they would come in and wait for the final figures. And there was one woman, and I just prayed that God would infest her armpits with 1,000 fleas because she was horrible. But anyway, she came in, and she started shouting at me. I'd been here, this was my first week. She started saying, what's the matter with you? Have you not got any brains? Why can't you do this job? And she was going on and going on and going on, and all of a sudden Wayne just snapped. I'd been there about 3 days. And I turned to her and I said, were you born being able to do the job that you do? She just looked at me. I said, no, you weren't. You had to learn to do it. You started your role, maybe with the dinosaurs were around because she was that old. You started your role then. And I said, you didn't know how to do it when you started, did you? But people got alongside you. And you learn on the job as you move forward. And now you can do the job. Bit like when you started, you can't always drive. You weren't born being able to drive. You have to learn to drive. I said, and you babbling and huffing and puffing and shouting at me, woman's not going to get it done any quicker, is it? She didn't spoke to me for 3 years, but... I said, give me time. And over time, I got quicker. And there's the day that I'm waiting for her. Thank you, Jesus. But, it just got quicker because you learn on the job. You can't do it instantly. We can't be super disciples without any kind of formation by Jesus. It's on the job that we learn. In the same way that those fishermen were formed on their journey with Jesus, so too are you and me. They not only learned on the job, but they grew on the job. Jesus wasn't interested in having fully formed and experienced disciples. He was simply wanting disciples who were willing to follow. Because you see, friends, discipleship is not instant perfection. It's a process of transformation. Think of a potter. And, some of you will probably love the pottery throwdown program that's on TV. But when a potter gets a lump of clay, he doesn't click his fingers and it turns into this wonderful bowl. He has to work it. He has to mold it, throw water on it, speed the pottery, whatever you call it, up and slow it down again. Puts his hands in to shape it. Has to work it. And sometimes, depending on the batch of clay, that could be really, maybe not the greatest clay in the world. So he has to work harder with it to make sure it's pliable and malleable. It's the same with us. We don't have to know everything about Jesus. Here's the spoiler for you. You never will. The more you know about Jesus, the more you realize you don't know about Jesus. But as you walk with Jesus over time, he forms you and keeps forming you. And you realize you grow without realizing you're growing. When Jesus calls us to follow him, he isn't looking for people who are willing to enter perfection. He's looking for people who are willing to enter a process of transformation. That's what he saw in those first disciples. And our formation will lead us to live in fruitful lives for Jesus, which in turn will see us step into all that Jesus has for us. For you see, obedience unlocks destiny. Don't worry, this is the final point. Until this ordinary day, all these fishermen were in a circle of work, eat, sleep, rest, rinse, repeat. Every day, that's what they did. It wasn't a bad life, but they were not changing history one sardine at a time. And yet when Jesus said, follow me, and they obediently followed, this gave them a destiny that they would never, ever have imagined. When they were casting their nets, they would never thought about witnessing miracles, preaching the gospel and shaping the whole of human history. As he was casting out a net, Peter would never have thought that he will preach, and after his sermon, 3,000 people would be added to his number. Will follow the Messiah in one event. You know, we often want to control everything, don't we? We're impatient and we want results instantly. And yet one step of faith can lead to a life beyond our imagination. One yes of obedience can change everything. We've just finished celebrating Christmas, and right at the start of the Advent journey, we read how Mary was visited by the angel who said she was chosen to be the mum of Jesus. Mary said yes when she said, may it be just as you have said. I often wonder if she thought about saying no. I often wonder if the angel was giving her choice. I think he was. I think Mary had to be obedient, and her yes not only changed her, but it changed the world. Growing up, she would have heard the prophecies about the Messiah. She would not have thought in a million years that she would be the virgin that Isaiah prophesied about 700 years previously. Yet her obedience unlocked her destiny. I want to say to you, if you feel you're stuck in the spiritual rut, feel like God doesn't use you, you don't feel like you're growing in your faith, it's the same old, same old. I would encourage you and challenge you to realize that Jesus is giving you the opportunity to follow his walk of calling. And no, I don't mean into becoming a minister or a missionary, although that might be what he's calling you into. And if that's the case, come and have a chat with me. Let's have a coffee. But I mean just a calling into a fuller walk with him. And worship, we can come back up. For Jesus is saying, follow me, to all of us. He's always calling us into deeper discipleship where we not only know what it is to love Jesus, but we know what it is to follow Jesus. And our lives are continually transformed. That's the walk of calling that I believe Jesus is presenting before all of us at the start of this year. So friends, may you know, all of you, that Jesus calls you from where you are. To be real about it, it will mean leaving something behind to follow him. That might be a habit. It might be a lifestyle that's not good for you. It might even be a change of something in your life. And that will be personal and at times disruptive. Don't worry that you're not the finished article, for none of us are. But if we allow Jesus to form us and shape us on the journey and to experience all of that during this next year, we have to be obedient to him. And that will unlock a destiny that's beyond your imagination. Sound like a good life to you? It does to me. It's a life that Jesus, in his walk of calling the first disciples, offers to all of us. And all we have to do is say yes. That's it. Say yes. And church, as I close off this sermon, can I just speak candidly for a moment? Specifically to BBC, Billericay Baptist Church. I believe, and the elders believe, that Jesus is calling us to new things during this next year. He's calling us to these things from where we are. And we will have to leave some things behind. And there's going to be a cost to that. We won't have it all figured out, but God will form us on the journey. And if we will be obedient, even though that may be difficult, I believe with all my heart that we will, as a church, see a destiny that we could only ever have imagined. And these are not simply emotive words to us as a church, but they have substance that over the coming months, as elders, we're going to be sharing things with you. That's a teaser, isn't it? But when you hear it in the coming months, I want to ask you to come back to this message today. For Jesus is on a walk of calling to us as individuals, but also us as a church. And we have to choose to be like those first disciples, to follow him. For if we don't, we will miss out on all that he has for us. It's as simple as that. Jesus is calling us from an ordinary life into extraordinary discipleship. He's calling us as a church from an ordinary church life into an extraordinary discipleship church life. And I believe it's going to be one heck of a ride. But we have to follow to experience it. And that, friends, is a choice you're going to have to make. Let's pray together. Father, I want to pray over every person gathered in this place or gathered online. I want to pray that they will have a sense of your voice calling to them. Calling them to true discipleship. To apprentice under you, to follow you in all areas of life. I pray that for us as individuals, and I pray that for us as a church. So by your Spirit, would you challenge us? Right now, as our eyes are closed, would we have a sense of what this means for us? What you're saying to us? And what you're calling us into. And may we know that a life with you, that's what we're being called into. And it's a life that nothing in this world can compare with. And so we come to your altar because you're calling. And we come to a fuller life with you. And may all of us in this place today respond to your call as we see you call us, as you take a walk of calling to all those you love. Bless you and thank you. Amen.